10 p.m. I almost texted people being like, should I go back to the Capitol? And I was like, no. It's already good. Yeah. Hopefully. Last night, I was like, did you think you guys did it? Yeah, I was like, why? And first, he was like, well, maybe a couple days after. And I was like, yeah. Could be fun. June 1st is relative, according to some Republicans.
I think if they like
no.
It's really fun. It's like a premier bureaucrat.
It was like job in his
job. Treasury for 30 years. And this is his dad. He's in Ohio right now.
Oh, it's funny.
And normally he used to yell it like once every
yeah. And now he's like constant,
yeah,
like
daily.
The money guy is over treasury, like the actual money guy. Yeah. Also like a good way to break through and wall-to-wall, very sympathetic coverage.
Yeah. That's great.
For some reason, I'm doing my workshop between 9:08 and 9:12.
Después de la clase, entonces va a ser.
If another reporter comes up, they stop it. Thank you. I know you.
Do you hold it with my right hand or my left?
You do it however you want.
Okay.
Okay.
I actually perfected the art of holding my phone with shoes on. Can you believe it?
Morning.
I get back.
Morning.
That's my wife.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. Great dress. Purple's my favorite color.
Thank you.
Color of royalty.
What is your sense right now of how these negotiations are going, and are you worried at all that Kevin McCarthy is cut a bad deal or a deal conservatives to get back?
No, Speaker McCarthy was very good at deal cutting, and I trust him. he says it's going to start snowing in Knoxville tomorrow. I'm running down to Mayo's and buying a new sled.
This comes after you didn't vote for the Republican debt ceiling
Right.
plan. So, I mean, what makes you confident you could back him?
Well, I gave my word. You know, I didn't vote for him under Trump, and that'd be disingenuous. So I started voting for him. You know, I still not a fan of debt. That's he was that debt ceiling. I think they're going to come back with something, and I think not everybody's going to be happy on our side, and not everybody's going to be happy on their side, but I believe they'll squeeze out enough to get the votes. And if they don't, I believe the president will start cutting things like veterans and senior care, the most vulnerable people, and then people get a few phone calls, and then they'll vote.
Would you vote for a debt? Do you think it's something that Kevin McCarthy negotiated in good faith?
I don't know. I just have to see it.
So even though you did not support debt ceiling increases under Trump and you didn't support the last piece of legislation, you think you could vote for a negotiated deal between the parties?
If it's something I like, I could.
What would be something you like?
I'd have to see a real reduction in the deficit, not just the rate of growth.
Thank you.
You should say you think that will happen, and I'll say no. See you, girl.
Bye.
Jody, morning.
Thank you. Yeah, he's very like I was checking
Hey, how are you doing? Was
Got a
that?
second?
Sure.
How are you feeling about negotiations for the debt ceiling right now?
Well, just keep an eye on it, and I know Speaker McCarthy is working hard at it. I think hopefully we'll get to something soon.
Do you think that you're going to be able to support a deal if he reaches one with the president?
Well, you know, it's hard to say until you see what's moving forward, but we've entrusted Speaker McCarthy with the leadership, and he's down there negotiating, and what he brings back and offers to the committee, to the conference, I certainly will plan to support it. Of course, I have to see it first, but I absolutely plan to support what Speaker McCarthy brings forward.
It's a non-majority. Do you think that Speaker McCarthy will be the speakership, or is that do you think the speakership if he brings back negotiating with the president that is less than the majority?
Well, I don't think so. I just don't think so. I really don't.
You know. Trying to get him coming out.
That was
But he looks the same.
yeah, he looked. And that's right now.
Well, his hair was always low. Well, Stab was in this a long time. When I knew him, he was about 8 years, just 30. Yeah. You were like just when you were Oh, really?
I'm sure he's told you. I don't remember.
Yeah, he worked at the White House, man. He's retired. He was here for, I mean, forever. Yes.
One of the big magazines.
Something like that.
Well, I maintain my position that we've passed a bill, and conversations may or may not be underway. The latest update I'll find out when I go upstairs, but the fact is the American people expect us to actually do something meaningful. And as I put out last week, on a thread, every single provision of what we passed was purposeful. Democrats want to completely destroy this country from the top to the bottom, including the energy subsidies, which are favoring the elite, IRS, which would cause more audits for the poor and minorities, the expansion of the bureaucratic state, including the FBI, which goes after parents. So we've got to have fundamental change. We're not going to just take a partial change. We've got to get actual transformative change.
How concerned are you that the speaker might give in?
Hi. How are you? Thanks, Morgan. Yep, no problem. Okay.
What up? You missed him. You missed him.
Who?
Aaron Graves, the negotiator.
We jumped in on you. Thank you, Joe.
You walk right now. I think he may have been avoiding us.
Probably so.
Does that happen very often to you? Never happens to
Let's
me.
go around. Stop me off there.
Hey, this is big.
Literally is jeopardizing the generation after us, the children and grandchildren of today, and this is just unsustainable.
So are they still demanding a freeze instead of pulling back spending?
They are refusing to truly change the trajectory, to truly reduce spending, and that is a red line. We're not going to continue doing the way things have been done. It's irresponsible.
How concerned are you about timing at this point?
Look, I am. I'm very concerned about timing, which is why they need to come to the table, which is why it was irresponsible for them to wait 100 days before they were willing to engage and begin having these conversations. Let's be clear. Just like the border crisis was self-manufactured, the energy crisis was self-manufactured, what we're dealing with today was manufactured by this administration as well. We are willing, and we told them on the first day of negotiations that we would stay in that room 24 hours. We told them that. They said, no, let's wait, let's break, let's do meetings in the morning and afternoons. Our commitment stands. We'll work all night, we'll do 24 hours, but we're not going to continue on this trajectory. It's irresponsible and it jeopardizes the future of the next generation. Thank you.
Are you guys meeting today? Yes.
First of all, got to the table where he's and I think he's already committed to some spending. I'll describe around and what sort of
No.
I just walked up there.
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Just let me know if I stay on the screen for a long time.
Get you to stand just a little bit over.
Yes, okay. Well, obviously,
Are you a Kupka fan?
You know, he deserved to win. He put in a lot of work. He went through a lot of injuries. He came back, and like many great athletes, he's endured some difficult times and made a great comeback. So yeah, I'm just glad I didn't have to play that golf course.
Well, golf is a tough sport, but also debt negotiations are pretty tough too. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on where things stand right now with the White House negotiations with your leader, Mr. McCarthy.
Well, I feel like we're in a good position. Obviously, they did not expect our conference to be able to pass what is a real common sense approach to the debt limit increase. So the Senate obviously doesn't have the votes either way for a clean or a compromise. So I think the president's going to have to take a leadership role here, and he and our Speaker McCarthy are going to work it out, and then the president will have to somehow convince the Senate to vote for it, and assuming we have the votes in the House. But I think I think we're in a good position.
Do you think the White House shares the sense of urgency?
Here you go, gentlemen.
That's not currently divided in terms of order from the White House. I know. I think they could have seen the typewriter. Let's go to the White House. I assume so, but I came up way too bad.
I like yours too.
I came up just too bad.
For instance, we knew that there were videos on it that we did not have. Now, they were supposed to remain everything. J6
Well, Republicans are gathering this morning, John, to have a discussion.
Yeah, I ran this morning at 6. So yeah, I go fast.
This morning, who say that they have a lot of trust in Speaker McCarthy. Sure, yeah.
Trucks are still there. It's actually for the departures.
I mean, if you don't have a bill by
Oh,
you're not aware of this. You bet, yeah.
I know, I had my well, I did, but it was like 50.
But then I went to 80.
Hey, Dad, congrats.
Appreciate it, man. It's been a busy couple of weeks. Yeah. Congratulations. Appreciate that, man. Like November.
Wow.
Election baby from here on out.
Wow.
So we're pumped up. Yeah. Good for you. Thanks, man.
It's just the first line. It takes the rest of it out of context.
Hardly anybody.
I did, yeah. Well, he didn't say that, but he can report.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You may not have. I haven't listened back to it yet. Although, do you have the first line for what he said? Because I was trying to get my audio started and ask him questions through the camera, and so I can compare his first.
Talking about how the meeting with the FBI went yesterday, your staff, and then.
Thank you so much. Yep, we're good. As soon as it becomes slow, we'll see that. Right. But it's something that it's not in the order that I sent to the network either. So I was going to send them the top line and be like, this is that first one. That makes sense.
Stay up.
Who's down there? I would want to talk to Chanel.
She had come in, you know, I'm going crazy. Still far from work.
Yeah. What's your picture day? No, he's going to let him talk. Set up an interview
I
with
know,
her.
yeah, Republicans want to freeze spending at last year's levels at this year. I don't have a problem with that per se. You can't keep doing this. You have to grow the economy. To do that, you have to freeze, at least cut some spending. You also have to lower taxes. The Fed can't keep printing money the way that it does today, and we don't have control over that. But there are several things that we have to do to grow the economy. Look at the economic growth we had in Q1. Economists thought we were going to grow by 2%. I don't know. And it's not like this was just the Democrats' fault. Republicans and Democrats alike caused this problem. And my sense is that Republicans only care about spending when Democrats are in charge. And it's yes, we should all care about spending no matter who's in charge, Republican or Democrat. I would like to see us free spending at last year's levels. I'm fine with that. Work requirements, I'm fine with that. Don't raise taxes. I think that can get us there for the next year or two. That seems responsible. But at some point, in the next year or 2 years, we have to come up with a plan to balance the budget. That has to be a part of this. Maybe not part of this package right now, and I'm okay with that if it's free spending. But at some point over the next 2 years, there has to be a balance in the budget. Over the next 10 to 20 years. I don't. I don't want Speaker McCarthy's job. That's a very tough job that he has. He has multiple. He's got the 5 families to deal with in a caucus of 1 right here. He's doing a great job in pulling people together. What he did on the initiative vaccine goes. I do not envy his position at the 1 moment, and he's had a lot of success in getting a lot of different factions together within the party, and that's no small feat. And it's not easy. Thank you.
dropping the battery off.
I got an easy gig.
So go back to the Capitol?
No, you want you make a difference.
Okay.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah. How about you? Yeah. Is this live? Oh yeah. How long have you been out here? Where the Suburbans are. Is there a presser inside a pen? All I have, my desk. I don't know. Oh, is it?
Not good.
Who did he hire from to build that office?
Put it over a good bit of his career, his own book operations, his own restaurant operation, but a lot of NRCC hires.
Hitting one of those bollards? Wow. Oh, okay. Oh, just live.
Got any Netflix?
Oh, God.
Yeah. My birthday.
onto the.
There's a lot of I'm going to email you twice today. Mid-afternoon.
Can I walk with you a sec?
I'm not sure he heard us. The video. Oh, whoa, revolutionary. Yeah. He's the devil. The whole thing on tape.
Give a second.
What event is this going on?
Oh, just Republicans meeting.
Wouldn't say something.
He's usually not the fake phone call type, so it must have been really.
He might have one of those unlimited plans.
Yeah, it's good. Keeps it up.
Hey, you're back.
And if I come back in a week or another week or another week?
That's too bad. It doesn't have to do the same thing.
Now, if the phone screen is completely black, does that mean it's off or?
No, it can mean he's fine.
Yeah.
Because it goes to black if you're consistently holding it. His was black, by the way.
It was definitely black. I saw it.
When you really do. No. Yes. No,
that's the key.
I have exhausted him when he's actually talking. He's wonky. He wants to.
Did you bust somebody?
No, Mom did.
That was
Ron Johnson.
That was a classic. That was a classic.
Something he was off the phone.
Weird that he would do that. You know, he just tells me I should be ashamed of this. Not a real talk. Yes.
Yeah, right. You're kind of asking.
It's like a character act. You know? Yes. Well, you know, like. Yeah.
I was just driving through South Dakota and on the interstate outside of home.
Oh, yeah. How many members of Congress are from there? Just him, right? Him? John Thune.
Oh, yeah. That's it.
But I was like, I need to, the security camera can't be back.
Yeah.
So I need to ask find someone who's really found someone who's
I wanted to get your thoughts on
Morning.
What's going on with those? They're doing
Snap?
and medically or a little down?
How far off are we at that center right now? Right now, it's across here.
Have a good day. You too. Particularly like Patrick and Henry McCall. I don't know if I'm doing this. Definitely I was about time yesterday. How are you today?
Hey, what are you up to?
Oh, you know, just sleep. It's the
Yeah, red light. true. Oh yeah, right. I remember.
As far as I know, that is your phone. One more idea. Three-way swaps for okay. Well, I'm not exactly skeptic, so I don't know where they see whatever it takes to get back. Air Force Secretary is I'm glad that they're really putting a lot of preparation because the more stock that goes into that,
These are all for you.
His son had area districts by Democratic for hitting you for voting.
I mean, I think that's a question for the President of the United States, who buried his head in the sand for 104 days and was siding with the rich elitists in this country instead of hardworking Americans.
The President and the Speaker to stop negotiating. The Speaker is still negotiating with the President. Does that concern you?
No. The Speaker's negotiating this publicly. He's always getting injured around me walking. But exactly.
Can you just stop? Can you just stop for a minute?
But I'm going to like right now. There are ICE agents, right?
Sure.
Zapata was killed in 2011, and they're about to potentially back off of the sentencing for an ICE agent that was killed by cartel members. So I'm going to head over to the court right now to go support ICE agents.
Just about the debt limit real quickly. That's obviously another huge issue here. So if they come back with something less than the House bill, how would you react?
Say that again?
If the deal that comes back is less than the House bill, how would you react?
Well, I don't know what less is. I mean, the president owes us a response. But I want to see what he's going to say about the subsidies that currently go 90% to billion-dollar corporations. I want to know what he's going to say about IRS that targets the poor and the minorities more than non-poor minorities. I want to know what he's going to say about the fact that they've got student loans that are picking winners and losers. What do they do about all that? Should ignore all that?
But the Speaker's going to have to compromise in some way. Are you willing to accept a compromise?
I mean, I think in this town, I mean, you know, everybody always starts talking about compromises before the other side has even actually offered anything. What has the president offered? I mean, I've seen nothing. I've seen nothing out of the president or the Senate. The fact is, we passed a bill that will raise the debt ceiling. The fact is, we're going to have cash in June. The fact is, we're not going to default on our debt. That's just completely false. We've got the money to do it. So everybody just needs to be patient and let us, work through our day. I got to go.
Do you not buy the June 1st deadline?
I'm going to go.
Do you not buy? You don't buy that June 1st deadline?
Well, I mean, I think it's a manufactured crisis, is what I. That's Jenny Yellen. She's the one with her magic Ouija board.
Excuse me, but you're not serious, and I don't think he is.
Did the Speaker say the deal is far apart?
Absolutely. We're not even close. Well, I don't know why we're even meeting. He's offering nothing. Put it in writing.
Are you concerned that the Speaker is still meeting with the President?
I'm concerned that Biden is not a priority for him. Anything else?
But the Freedom Caucus asked
him
not to negotiate. Asked the Speaker not to negotiate.
Not to negotiate off the package. We've already put something together that nobody said we could do. This administration is shipwrecking the country, and he's flippant on this. Why?
But should the Speaker compromise from the House's package?
We passed with 218 votes a package that we're going to stick with. We're going to stay with that. That's meager. A lot of us would want 4 times that. What was in it, and for this president just to sit back and act like nothing's happening, this isn't something he can do. I do think Yellen will say that we do have money coming in. She'll extend it, but right now she's using June 1st. Everybody knows that's false.
You don't buy June 1st?
No, I don't buy June 1st. Tax revenues are coming in, particularly from California and other states.
So how much time do you think we have?
Ask her. We need to subpoena her and get her plan.
So, Mr.
What is her plan? She hasn't had it.
When there's a bill that passes with Democratic votes, would you file a motion to vacate the chair? I mean, is that
I'm not going to go there. But
oh, come on.
McCarthy has done a great job. He's been there to try to talk to a leader of the free world that will not talk. He will not do anything. He will not put anything in writing. That is unacceptable, and it's un-American what he's doing in the country.
What was his message to the Speaker, to you and other members?
Nothing has been done. Nothing's changed.
And he said they're nowhere near an agreement
said nothing's changed, meaning no. The only way it changes is if he puts it in writing. His words mean nothing. Let him put it in writing, and we'll look at it. And to have any cuts, he's got to give on something else.
Do you not buy that if there's a default, that there'll be a pretty disastrous economic ramification?
I don't think there's going to be a default. But ask Biden that. You reporters need to ask Joe Biden, what's he delayed? Why is he not putting importance on this? It's an insult to America that he's doing this. But he's done it on every other instance. The border, inflation, crime. He buries his head and thinks it disappears. It doesn't work that way.
Mr. Gates, do you have concerns about the negotiations, the direction of these talks between the Speaker and the President?
Well, I don't believe that the first of the month is a real deadline. Like, I don't understand why we're not making Janet Yellen show her work. Janet Yellen couldn't see inflation coming like an oncoming train, but she wanders out of some back room in the White House with a Ouija board under her arm telling us the first of the month is the number, and we're supposed to take that as some sort of article of faith. Like, let's keep in mind, there's a whole lot of cash about to show up on June 15th. So I think this is yet another circumstance where Joe Biden is creating a crisis that he cannot solve, and we should hold to absolutely no less than the House position right now. And if Janet Yellen can really prove that the receipts and the deposits create this default on June 1st, she should come to Congress and prove that, because I no longer trust, like the Obi-Wan Kenobi of wrong answers on the economy, to be able to tell me when the default occurs.
Did you subpoena her?
I think she should come voluntarily. Look, you shouldn't have to execute on a subpoena to get someone to come and show more of their work than your typical 8th grader with their algebra homework.
Aren't you concerned, though, that this could be a roll of the dice? What if she's right and you guys don't have a deal and there's a default? Isn't that a risk?
I do not believe that to be the case. And we have a whole lot of cash showing up on the 15th of the month that I believe will sustain the government. So I think this is a Biden-generated crisis, and whether it's the border or the economy, this presidency is defined by crises that they create and then cannot solve. So look, if Janet Yellen could prove that default, let her come forward and prove it. This is the lady who blew it on inflation, and we're supposed to think she's got the abacus totally lined up on the exact day of default. Does anyone sincerely believe that? Does any real American believe that? I don't.
Just to be clear, do you really think that we could never default? But it's
No,
just gonna keep coming
no.
in?
Look, I think we have to deal with our complex spending problems. I think that's why. Look, I do believe we have a spending crisis. We just don't have a revenue crisis. We have more revenue than ever before compared to the percentage of the economy. So we're doing real well on the revenue front. It's the spending problem that's choking our economy and driving the inflation that is why we are in the majority in the first place. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, appreciate it. It looks like Graves and so why we stand with
White House, and the White House at the highest levels needs to understand the urgency of sending their team forward and making sure we understand we have to spend less money next year. And everything else can come into zone if we can get that understanding.
What happened last night in the meeting that has prompted a very different tone from where you were after the White House meeting?
Look, I thought the White House meeting was reasonably productive. What we need is a team that's fully empowered by the White House to get the thing done. The White House still has this expectation that they can spend more money next year. Republicans control the House. We passed a debt ceiling increase. The reason why we're having these negotiations in the Speaker's suite, as opposed to being hat in hand at the White House, is because House Republicans passed a plan to raise the debt ceiling. That is counter to what Senator Schumer was recommending on their political side of how to drag out this debate. We're now at this moment where we need to close a deal before we get to brinksmanship and getting close to the next date. That is not in anyone's interest, not in America's interest. So we need a sense of urgency.
So you don't think the staff, Bruschetti and Shalanda, are empowered to make a deal?
They need to come to terms, and the White House needs to come to terms with the fact they can't spend more next year than they're spending this year.
Will you guys accept anything other than returning spending levels to FY 2022 levels?
I'm sorry, the math is the math, right? And everybody's trying to figure out some way to shimmy this thing around. It's fundamental. You're spending less money next year than you're spending this year. Everything else can come into zone. But if you don't get the spending question right, then that is fundamentally at odds with what House Republicans passed.
And let me just put some color in this. So what Patrick is talking about, by bringing us back to 22 levels or reducing spending less than we're spending this year, that is over $100 billion more than the Obama budget had intended for this year. It is over $100 billion more than the Trump budget had indicated for this year. We're not talking about draconian cuts. These are reasonable levels of spending. This administration has a spending problem. And until they realize that, unless and until they realize that, we're not going to be able to come together.
Are you guys dealing at all with the ancillary issues around clawing back COVID funding, permitting reform, work requirements, or is everything right now wrapped up in this question of are you going to get a spending deal?
Those things are all on the table because those all deliver government efficiency and, in the case of, for example, work requirements, something that Joe Biden voted for 11 times, something that Bill Clinton negotiated in 1996, something that actually provided a better life for the American people stuck in a cycle of poverty, bringing them into the workforce, also addressing the labor shortage we have today, bringing folks back into Social Security and Medicare, helping to improve the solvency of those funds. You're damn right. Those are absolutely on the table because that's what good government looks like.
But can you even get to those issues until you deal with the fundamental spending question?
I actually think the equation needs to be flipped over. I think that we need to address those issues first because then it gives us an idea of what type of gap we've got to address on the spending.
Is HR2 the border bill part of the conversation?
We've had border discussions. Yeah.
Do you think you need the pressure
we have
to get the urgency that you're looking for from the market?
I hope not.
And when is your next meeting?
Shortly.
Can you split the difference between 22?
While calling the White House shit. Hold that.
Oh, no, I'm just...
It was also hard to gauge as well because each video started low.
With all of our hardworking law enforcement who put their lives on the line every single day. We are praying for the recovery of both of those officers who are currently at Albany Medical Center, as well as their family members. These violent criminals must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I know that all of my colleagues stand strongly with our law enforcement officers, not only in upstate New York, but across this nation. On the debt ceiling, which I know many of you will ask today, for months, President Biden was missing in action on the debt ceiling, refusing to negotiate with Speaker McCarthy and putting our economy into jeopardy. Now, less than 10 days from a default, Joe Biden has yet to offer or accept our sensible solution that raises the debt ceiling and addresses our debt crisis. House Republicans remain the only ones who have passed legislation to responsibly raise our debt ceiling and rein in the reckless spending to save our country for future generations. This week, House Republicans are also taking action to address yet another crisis worsened by Joe Biden and extreme House Democrats' open border policies. That is the deadly fentanyl crisis. Just this past weekend, in my home county, Rensselaer County, they had to issue a warning after a spike in overdose-related deaths. Communities across this country are being devastated by these innocent lives being lost. The HALT Fentanyl Act, which will be on the floor this week, would supply law enforcement with the tools needed to keep fentanyl off our streets and deliver on a key pillar of our commitment to America, a nation that's safe. I'm now going to pass it over to one of our freshmen, as we do every single week, Max Miller from Ohio's 7th District. Max.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stefanik. We're all here today for the same reason. We understand something that must be done to stop this deadly drug from killing more of our loved ones. Last month in Cuyahoga County, law enforcement confiscated Rainbow Fentanyl, which is designed to market this deadly drug to children. Simply put, this is death disguised as candy. This week, House Republicans will work to ensure law enforcement have the tools that they need to keep these extremely lethal and dangerous drugs off of our streets. Just last month, local law enforcement, the DEA, and the U.S. District Attorney's Office busted an organized drug trafficking ring of 18 individuals who were involved in the distribution of fentanyl across communities I represent in Ohio's 7th Congressional District. While we are grateful for their heroic work, we know that fentanyl is still killing far too many people year after year in Ohio. In March alone, 130 people died from fentanyl overdoses just in Cuyahoga County. We cannot sit by idly and allow this poison to continue to wreak havoc on our streets throughout our country. If the current temporary emergency class-wide scheduling orders expire, then many fentanyl-related substances become street legal. Law enforcement loses their authority to seize these lethal drugs. Drug traffickers are empowered to push deadlier and deadlier drugs on our streets, skirting federal law by changing as little as one molecule in the fentanyl formula to create legal variations. And Customs and Border Protection loses the authority to seize these substances as they cross the border, which is the primary way illicit fentanyl enters the United States after being made in Mexico with chemicals imported from China. Thankfully, the House will take action on the HALT Fentanyl Act this week to make permanent the temporary class-wide scheduling order for fentanyl-related substances and give law enforcement the tools that they need to keep Americans safe and to save countless lives across this country. I thank you, and it is my honor to introduce Representative Morgan Griffin out of Virginia.
Thank you, Max. I appreciate that. Max got it right, and he laid out the main issue in this bill, and that is we want to make sure our law enforcement has the protection that it needs. They don't have to be chemistry majors in order to work on the border or to be in law enforcement. They need to be able to just to say, okay, it's fentanyl. And what we found was, before we had the temporary order in place, was that the bad guys, the Chinese importing the active pharmaceutical ingredients and the Mexican cartels, were trying to figure out ways to come up with something that had just as much punch as fentanyl, but was just a little bit different in its chemistry makeup. And by doing that, they were able to challenge it in court as to whether or not the substance was even legal. There are, according to the testimony in front of the Energy and Commerce Committee, there are 4,800 potential fentanyl analogs, or as we've defined them in the bill, fentanyl-related substances. Now, we've only tested about 37 of them. We found one that may have some potential, needs more research, and that's why this bill also has a research component that allows universities to do the research. Maybe there's something out there that we'll find that will be able to stop the effects of fentanyl, because Narcan does not really do a good job on that right now. So, we're hopeful, but we want to make sure that we keep this stuff illegal so the bad guys don't profit, and that we're able to continue to do in the research. And that's what the bill does. Now, there have been some fears and concerns that this would stop the use of fentanyl for medical purposes. It does not. This bill has nothing to do with fentanyl itself and the use for medicine by our doctors. It is only the fentanyl analogs that are affected by this bill. And I now turn it over to our great whip, Tom Emmer.
Thank you, Morgan, and Elise, all of us. Our thoughts and prayers are with you and all the residents of Saratoga and the great law enforcement folks that you have there. As our conference chair already indicated, we're 9 days out from the Biden administration's default deadline. And one thing remains absolutely clear. Whatever default Joe Biden is threatening is on Joe Biden. For more than 100 days, Speaker McCarthy has called on Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer to negotiate a responsible debt limit plan. What has Biden done instead? He gaslights the American people and then flees to Japan. What has Chuck Schumer done? He passed a bill naming the month of March Maple Syrup Month. Under Kevin McCarthy's leadership, House Republicans passed an American plan that responsibly raises the debt ceiling while reining in the Democrats' out-of-control spending. To this day, we're the only ones that have provided a solution to avoid default. It's now up to the president to come to the table, with some ideas so that we can make real strides to address this issue. Otherwise, pass our bill. It's over in the Senate. Perhaps the senators should come back from their short vacation and take this crisis that we've been advised is a crisis seriously. The question actually remains, what is Joe Biden and his administration willing to give to provide solutions to the debt ceiling crisis and put this country on a better financial path? If you can't answer the question, again, it is Joe Biden and the Democrats who will have to explain to every American why they decided to default for the first time in this nation's history. With that, I turn it over to our great majority leader, Steve Scalise.
Thank you, Whip. And my thoughts and prayers also go to the law enforcement community in Saratoga. Last week we dedicated the whole week to National Law Enforcement Week. We pray for our men and women in uniform who keep our community safe. We know how tough of a job it is. And every day when a law enforcement officer wakes up, they know what's out there, but they also know that as they face danger, as they keep our community safe, we are praying for their safety and giving them the tools that they need. As Morgan Griffith's bill does, we are working on a number of different fronts to attack the scourge that is fentanyl. This is something that since Joe Biden opened the southern border, we have seen flood into our country. Every day in America, nearly 300 young people die from fentanyl and other related overdoses. It's a national scandal that can be stopped. It can be stopped by securing the border. The bill H.R. 2 that we passed would do that. But in the meantime, while we're seeing this flood of fentanyl continue to come in unchecked across our southern border, this Congress is taking action. And Morgan's bill, the Halt Fentanyl Act, really does address it in a few ways as he talked about, but I think you're going to see a very bipartisan vote to permanently schedule this as a Class 1 controlled substance and give our law enforcement more tools to keep this drug out of our country, to stop the 300 young people every day who are dying from having to face these consequences. It shouldn't be here. The president can stop it today if he secures the border, but he won't do that. Something else that he hasn't done is to seriously engage in negotiations with Speaker McCarthy on the debt ceiling. We've seen it for months and months, going back to February when Speaker McCarthy got his first meeting with the president, laid out a list of things that we would do to address the debt ceiling, but also address the nation's spending problem. And let's keep in mind, when the country hits the debt ceiling, it's in essence because the credit card in the nation got maxed out. It got maxed out because Washington is spending more money than it takes in. So of course, we say make the minimum payment, but you also, any family, would also get control over spending rather than just give another credit card to go max out. And that's really where we're at a crossroads in this negotiation. President Biden hasn't taken this seriously. He took almost 100 days off in refusing to negotiate with the speaker. We didn't take any time off. We actually went to work saying if the president is going to just sit this out, try to run out the clock and create a debt crisis in America, Republicans will take action. And we worked for months in putting together a coalition to pass a bill that actually addresses the debt ceiling. It also addresses Washington's spending problem. And what is the answer that we're seeing in these last few days from Joe Biden? Again, continuing to run out the clock, not bringing serious ideas to the table, but actually bringing in new ideas that are non-starters. The president's actually talking about more tax hikes. We've made it very clear from the beginning, we're not going to raise taxes. Joe Biden did that in his first 2 years, and look at how that's worked out. I think it's important to point this out as Joe Biden is talking about raising taxes. Look at some of the taxes that Joe Biden has already signed into law to raise on hardworking families. These tax increases under Joe Biden's first 2 years in office are some of the reason that inflation is so high. Some of the reason why energy costs are so high for families, 40% more for household electricity rates. And people would ask, why is that? Well, in part it's because Joe Biden added $6.5 billion in taxes on natural gas. That is a direct tax increase on low and middle income families, breaking his pledge that anybody making under $400,000 a year wouldn't pay a dime in new taxes. Well, I guess he was right about the dime, because it's a lot more than a dime in new taxes than that families are paying. And I'm talking about families making under $60,000 a year who are paying this natural gas tax. You know what other tax Joe Biden signed into law that low-income families are also paying? $12 billion in crude oil taxes. So you wonder when people go fill up their car, they're paying 50% more in gasoline costs, in part because of Joe Biden's new tax there. And what is their answer? To try to kill the combustion engine. We actually have a bill this week to reverse the EPA's crazy idea of getting rid of heavy lift cars, your F-250 or other pickup trucks. They're going after all gasoline-powered cars in exchange for cars that ultimately contain a lot of components that are made in China. I don't call it his green agenda, I call it his red agenda, because the solar panels, a lot of the components of windmills, EVs, all made in China. And so the president keeps taxing those low-income families. $1.2 billion coal tax, $74 billion stock tax, which hits 401ks. Now, maybe President Biden thinks only the billionaires have 401ks. I hate to tell you, Mr. President, there are a lot of low-income families and middle-income families who have 401ks and are relying on that to be part of their nest egg to retire. And yet Joe Biden added $74 billion in taxes there. And as if that wasn't enough, Joe Biden signed into law $225 billion in more corporate taxes. And where do corporate taxes get paid? By people who buy things. Again, you wonder why when you go to the grocery store or when you go to any other store to buy clothes, to buy any other products, why it's costing 20 or 30% more. It's because all of the taxes that Joe Biden's already raised. And what is his answer to maxing out the nation's credit card? He wants more taxes. Well, the message we have for President Biden is there will be no more taxes. It's the spending in Washington that's the problem, and it's the spending in Washington that we have to address to solve this situation we're in with the debt ceiling. That's why we passed a bill to do it. We passed a bill, the Senate won't even come in to go to work, let alone try to pass their own bill. It's time for President Biden to get serious, bring real ideas to the table, or just say, Speaker McCarthy, the House passed a bill, President Biden ought to support it. And then that bill can get signed into law, and then this whole crisis he's trying to create is over. With that, we'll take some questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Majority Leader Scalise. A couple of questions, one for any one of you, and then the second one is for Congressman Miller. First one is, does anyone think the Federal Reserve has played a role in facilitating the current inflationary environment since the beginning of the pandemic? And then for Congressman Miller, what is your reaction to reports that progressives have been pressuring the Biden administration to dump the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IRA, definition of anti-Semitism? What is your reaction to a Jewish Insider report that the latest draft of the administration's strategy to combat anti-Semitism references the IRA definition in addition to the Nexus definition, the latter which is supported by progressives?
Well, bring up Max on the Treasury, on Janet Yellen. Look, she's the one who said that inflation was transitory. They have missed the mark every single time on understanding what was happening in the economy and all the devastation that the spending Joe Biden did in his first 2 years in office were causing. And they were late to react on interest rates, and so they ended up having to overreact and raise rates even higher and higher, creating a banking crisis. So crisis after crisis has been created by their lack of understanding of the fundamental basics of what's happening in this economy, and their answer is to try to double down and do more damage.
I'm talking about the Fed specifically, not the Treasury Department.
Yeah, but the Fed was late in addressing interest rates. Every economist will tell you when you have inflation rising out of control, interest rates ultimately have to tame inflation, and they waited so long that they ended up having to jack up interest rates a lot higher than they should be right now, and they still haven't gotten control of inflation because Joe Biden won't get control over spending. That's what the debt ceiling negotiation is all about.
And for your question, and I am aware of it, it's absolutely troubling. And there's one party, in my opinion, that has always stood by Israel, and that is the Republican Party, where I believe that more than 90% of our conference are Zionists. And if you look at the political influence that this administration has had over Israel and with their judicial reform, that's for Israel to work out, not for the United States to enter into hand. But we see this time and time again that this administration and these individuals and our colleagues on the left like to change definitions to fit their narrative. That's exactly what they're doing. And I was just in Israel a couple of weeks ago with Speaker McCarthy. And when we went there, you're able to see the dichotomy between where they are and where we are here in America and our views on them. It is extremely troubling that this administration is not as supportive of Israel as what we've seen. And this is just more of the same tack by President Biden and this administration to hammer on the biggest ally that we have in the Middle East, which is Israel. So, thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, so a lot of your Freedom Caucus members still don't believe that June 1st deadline is the actual hard deadline for a default that Janet Yellen has provided. One, do you believe in that deadline? What do you think of your members' skepticism about it? And then two, I just want to ask, do you think she should testify before Congress?
Well, we'd like to see more transparency on how they come to that date, but Janet Yellen herself actually left the door open to delaying that in her tweets yesterday. The comments that she sent out yesterday implied that it's June 1st or later, giving some openness to the idea that June 1st may not be the so-called X date. So, haven't really been able to see a lot of transparency, but it looks like they're hedging now and opening up the door to move that date back.
Last question.
If Secretary Yellen or the executive branch needs to prioritize what gets paid, does Congress have a say in that, or is that within the power of the executive branch to say federal workers don't get paid, Social Security checks don't go out? How does that work in your view?
Well, first of all, the real solution would be to pass the bill that the House passed. I don't know what methods they have. It seems like she's indicated they've looked at some different options. Like to hear what she has to say about that. All I know is we passed a bill to resolve this. No one in the Senate has moved to try to pass legislation. Again, if they've got a different approach, Chuck Schumer's really good at trying to criticize other people's ideas. I've yet to see Chuck Schumer's idea that can pass his chamber. We came up with ideas. We actually not only talked about them, we put them on paper, and then we put the votes on the board to pass them. And no other chamber's done that. The president, while criticizing the only plan that's passed, hasn't put anything on the table serious himself that could even pass the United States Senate. We'll do one more, yeah.
Do you think that the debt limit is still a constructive mechanism for shaping American fiscal policy?
Well, at some point, you've got to have a limit on how much the federal government can borrow. We want to get back to balanced federal budgets. And again, we've been there just at the beginning of this century. It was 2001, we were balancing budgets. We need to get back to that point, and the only way you do it, I mean, the real problem is today the federal government's still taking in money, in many ways record amounts, Problem is, it's spending too much, spending more than it takes in. For every $100 that the government takes in, it's spending $129. No business could be run that way. No family runs themselves that way. What we're trying to do is say, let's address the debt ceiling, but let's also address the extra $29 out of the 100 that's coming in that we're spending that we don't have, and get it back to a balanced budget. We're working out a plan for overtime to do it. The president doesn't even want to engage in that conversation. That has to.
Limit the best way to do that, or does
Well, there's got to be some mechanism to tell Washington that you can't keep printing money that you don't have, because ultimately it's future generations that pay this. It's just like President Biden's idea to just wave the magic wand and say nobody has to pay their student loans back. Every taxpayer in America is going to pay $3,500 per taxpayer for the 13% of Americans who would not have to pay their student loans back. Is that fair that somebody working 2 jobs is going to have to pay $3,500 so that somebody else doesn't have to pay a loan that they signed for? At some point in time, somebody's got to pay these bills. And Washington can't keep spending money it doesn't have. And so we're at the table saying we've got to get control over spending. We rebaselined the pre-COVID spending numbers, which is very reasonable. That was in our plan that we passed. We also included growth provisions to grow the economy, to get more people work requirements. Think about this. Again, Joe Biden voted for work requirements when he was a senator. That would say instead of spending $140 billion to pay able-bodied adults with no dependents to sit at home, how about you get them back into the workforce? Then they'd be paying into Social Security. That would actually strengthen Social Security. Joe Biden has undermined programs like Social Security by borrowing money from China to pay people to sit at home who are fully able-bodied. Those are basic reforms, again, that any family would do if they were managing their budget. It's time that Washington starts confronting the realities of out-of-control spending. Thank you.
Thank you.